Well, I had an interview with a wonderful lady. Her name is Sondra Sutton Phung, and she led a team and delivered a $1 billion of profit for Ford Motor Company's iconic SUV portfolio. And recently she's just been named Marketing General Manager for electric vehicles for Ford Motor Company, which is fantastic and a really cool lady to talk to. And Sondra and I talked about various things, and really the title of the episode is really called How Are You Projecting as a Leader? In other words, how are you showing up, or how are you projecting, how are you coming across to other people as well, which is really interesting. But we talked about the importance of global networks, and she feels that's going to be very key going forward about your ability to network not only locally but also globally as well. And then the other thing is that she shared some key elements that she feels that leaders need to have today. And so you need to check out the episode to understand what that is. And then, of course, I love this piece, be accountable with disruption. And so as we go through disruption, how can you be more accountable, or how can you be accountable full stop? Some really cool stuff that she shared. And 3 key words towards the end as well around building, connecting, and trust as well. And so check out this. This is a fantastic interview, and thoroughly enjoyed having a conversation with Sondra. So, listeners, sit back and enjoy the episode.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Dennis Giannoutsas.
Hey there, listeners. Welcome to another episode of the Leadership is Changing podcast. I have a wonderful guest with me today. Her name is Sondra Sutton Phung. Sondra, a massive welcome to you.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here, Dennis.
Awesome. Now, for our listeners' sake, whereabouts in the world are you today?
Well, I am in Novi, Michigan, which is southeast Michigan, very close to Detroit. It is about 7 p.m. at night here, so it's already very dark outside, and Christmas lights are blazing all down my street from every neighbor.
Yeah, so you're in the holiday season, of course, and you've had all of that underway with that as well, which is good. Of course, as you say, it is darker because in your part of the world it is winter, and in my part of the world we're going into summer. And so it's longer days here now and lighter as well, which is pretty good. Now, I've given the listeners, a little bit of an update or a background on you and your background, and sort of give an introduction there. But I'd love you to share a little bit more about your background. What would you like to share?
Sure. I'd love to give you a little bit more insight into me. I am from Georgia, born and raised, South Georgia, small town with only 5,000 people, so they're probably still missing me today. My town, I attended university in Georgia at Clark Atlanta University, which is a historically Black college and university. My undergrad and grad degrees are in mathematics. I joined Ford directly out of school, so all 25 years have been at one company, but it doesn't feel that way because I've worked in 4 countries. So I've worked in Japan for 3 years, China for 6, Thailand for 2, and then obviously the remainder of that in the U.S. So it's been a really, really great career in that way. Personally, I'm married. I have a 9-year-old daughter. I don't recommend having children late in life because you will be tired all the time, but she is the joy of my life. And I've been married for 16 years to a wonderful man that people think, because he's Vietnamese, I think I picked him up overseas, but I actually met him here in Dearborn and Regent Court at Ford. So the story isn't as crazy as some people think it would be.
Right. Oh, wow. That sounds pretty cool. Now, Ford Motor Company, that's awesome. And I understand today you're the marketing general manager for electric vehicles. And so that'd be a really, really cool area to be in within the automobile industry.
Yeah, it's a fascinating area to be in at this time. I will tell you that every day I'm learning something new. It's, I said recently to one of my team members that I was the perfect candidate for this job because I was driving around in my Expedition, which I love. But for those of you who are familiar with an Expedition, it's a really, really big SUV. And I was not convinced yet on the EV path. And then this job came along and it was interesting and exciting. And I said, let me learn more. And I am totally converted. I drive a Mustang Mach-E. I'm fascinated every day by the technology in the vehicle, by the savings, and the fact that I actually haven't been to a gas station in 4 months, and I'm paying less than $50 a month for gasoline for charging, which is a huge savings versus what I was paying before. But more importantly, the impact that Ford Motor Company is making to the environment with zero emission vehicles, and how we're changing lives even in the states of Kentucky and Tennessee by putting battery electric plants there and providing jobs to people locally. So it's just been a fascinating last 5-6 months that I've been in this role. Obviously, my career I've spent a large amount of time in product marketing and brand marketing, and sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here, and also in analytics. But this, I will say, has been the most fun so far in my career.
Oh, I think it's a really interesting area. And, I also see from your bio too that you from Ford Motor Company, but also you've been featured in magazines and so forth like Forbes, Fortune, Authority Magazine, and other global recognized leadership publications and podcasts. And of course, this podcast now, which is pretty good. And so I think that you're really quite keen in helping reduce the learning curve by sharing how leaders can accelerate their results and get more results going forward. And we're going to talk more about leadership a little bit later on as well. But you know what? I actually started my career and working for a Ford dealership here in New Zealand. And I understand that you've been to New Zealand before. You did some filming in Christchurch. Is that right?
I did. You've done your homework. I was actually working in China, and we were filming an ad for the Mondeo. And the Mondeo was, and obviously we sold it all across the world. It was called the Fusion here in the U.S. But we were filming it, and we decided to go to Christchurch. And we did an amazing ad. This is in China when our tagline was "Make Every Day Exciting." So it was a phenomenal ad that was done by our team in Asia, our advertising team. And we had a lot of fun with it. And it made me realize that I absolutely must come back to New Zealand because I didn't get enough of just seeing Christchurch. It was so beautiful. I want to see both the North and the South Island and really enjoy the full experience.
Oh, that's good. Around Christmas time is a really good time too because it's summer here, but even late January into early February is when we have some really, really good weather months. And so something you might want to think about. Or if you like skiing as well, we've got that as well. So it's not, it's pretty cool. You can go skiing, you can go swimming, you choose.
Well, I already have a master plan. I'm a huge tennis fan, and I've been to Wimbledon, the French Open, and obviously the U.S. Open. I have not been to the Australian Open. I've walked by Rod Laver Arena, but I have not actually attended an Australian Open. So my plan is to do Australia, New Zealand together with the Australian Open. I have it in the plan. I just need to now implement the plan.
That's good because the week before, maybe 2 or 3 weeks before the Australian Open opens, we have a competition here in New Zealand called the ASB Tennis Classic.
Okay.
And so some of those big top players come here and they play here first before they go into Australia. So like a little bit of a warm up. So yeah, you could do all of that and have fun as well, and and then go and watch some tennis in Australia. That'd be pretty cool as well. And you know what? We've got electric vehicles here too. So you can utilize that as well.
Yeah, I just signed. So yeah, I know you do, and I think we're sending some Mustang Mach-E's there very soon as well.
Oh wow! Maybe I should talk to you guys about getting a sponsorship with part of the podcast and then driving around a Ford vehicle here. That'd be pretty cool. There you go. Put you on the spot.
Anything's possible.
That's cool. There you go, listeners. You heard it here live. It's all good. Sondra, the thing here I wanted to ask you was, you've got an extensive background. You said 25 years in the company and so forth, and it's been one company. But, I spent almost that amount as well into Hewlett-Packard and EDS before that, and it all became one company. But you get to do different kind of roles as well.
Right.
For you, how did you get into leadership?
Well, my first role in leadership within the company, I would say, I was applying for a role in what was then called Global Consumer Insights. I think we would call it marketing analytics today. And it was my first time applying for a supervisor role in Ford Motor Company. Very nervous. It was actually an interesting time within the company. And what I learned in that experience was how important it is to have mentors and advocates advocating for you, because my career is non-traditional. As I share it with you, my undergrad and grad are in mathematics. When I joined Ford, I actually did a stint in IT as well as product development and marketing plans and brand development. So I didn't take the traditional path. And then after I finished those three, I then went to Japan for 3 years and did a program management role. So when I came back and decided I wanted to be a marketer when I grew up, it was important to have a few advocates and also support as I transitioned to marketing plan and to a global analytics role. And I was responsible for Asia Pacific. So I had an opportunity once again to support Australia, New Zealand, and all of Asia Pacific that Ford defined as the time, which included 13 countries. And so I traveled to about 7 or 8 of them, trying to make sure that we actually knew what how our business was tracking. Quite honestly, we didn't have a brand tracking that was global in Asia Pacific, so I implemented one. We had GQRS, which was a quality survey, but we didn't have it in every market, so I added it to every market. And then we had customer viewpoint, which is a way for us to understand customer sentiment about our vehicles and our brand. And again, I had an opportunity to implement that across Asia Pacific. So from that perspective, I feel like I've been working with the teams in Australia and New Zealand for the last 20 years. And so it feels really good to hear your accent. You're hearing mine. You don't hear an accent, but I do. And it's one of my fondest memories is my boss, Nigel Harris, who was a great buddy of mine, an advocate, and who was also from New Zealand. And so it feels like coming home again to be on this podcast today.
Awesome. Oh, that's really cool. I've actually got 3 questions actually from just what you've been sharing just now. When you say you didn't take the traditional role or the traditional path, I could say, some people wonder about that at times. Do I stick to marketing? Do I stick to, like IT? Do I stick to sales, delivery? What are your thoughts about people not sticking to the traditional pathway and maybe doing something else? Why is that so important, or is there some pros and cons in it?
Well, I think there are pros and cons, right? One of the things that is very different about my career is, as I mentioned to you early on, is that I grew up in a small farming town. And quite honestly, I think some people would consider it, a little bit below the poverty line. I didn't think we were poor, but now when I look at, how much money my mother was making and other, aspects of life, we were. And so there were just certain things that I didn't know. So I actually took the jobs that were interesting to me. And I would say 90% of the time, that's good. There's a 10% of the time where you're like, maybe I should have had a mentor and advocate to talk to who would have said, if your goal is to get to X level by X amount of time, you have to take this, this, and this check. So I'm a huge fan of whenever I talk to young people today, I say, get a mentor, someone who can help you understand what it takes to be successful in this company and to get to the level that you want to be. I was lucky because the experiences that were interesting to me were also interesting to the company. It was not normal for someone after 2 years in the company to go to Japan for 3 years on an international assignment. But that opportunity came up and I said yes, because it was interesting. I wasn't thinking, oh, I'm a trendsetter. I just thought it would be interesting to learn about the Japanese culture, how they get things done and how we collaborate. And that was a great opportunity for me. But it also created the situation of people not knowing how to describe me when they looked at my CV and tried to understand where does she actually belong within Ford Motor Company because I'd done multiple things.
And I think that's a really good thing too, in the situation whereby you have more all-rounder kind of experience rather than just in one area. So then you could probably run a large part of the business or all of the business because you do have that kind of experience. And I think that's a good thing. So the other two questions you've mentioned again just now, and one of them is, you mentioned mentors, but actually, and advocates. It's the advocates piece that I'm really quite keen to understand, which is also related to mentoring. The importance of having an advocate or having one or two sponsors within the organization. Mm-hmm. Is it really important for someone to have that? And then how do you find those kind of people?
Yeah, absolutely. It's absolutely important. I think very early in your career, it's important for you to have a mentor, just someone to help you understand how to navigate the politics, how to make decisions, as I mentioned earlier. But as you start delivering for the company and start creating a name for yourself, it's really important to start developing advocates. And advocates are people who will break down barriers that inevitably exist in large corporations. So you may be qualified for a role and someone else is qualified for a role, and the difference may be the advocate in the room for you. I'm a firm believer that no one who is extremely successful in life has gotten there without advocacy. It doesn't mean that they aren't smart, capable, or deserve the role, but it is the advocacy that makes a difference in many situations within the company.
Yeah. The way I look at it, listeners, is that what Sondra is just saying, and I think it's perfect, is the fact that, you have a sponsor, an advocate, somebody who's going to fly your flag. So if they're sitting in a meeting and they're talking about, well, we need to fill this role or we need to look for this person, the other ones are going to say, hey, so-and-so, they'll be the right person for that kind of role, or I think it would be really cool if we give them the opportunity. So I think that is very, very good. And you mentioned it just before about early in your career, find the mentor as you start to build your I call it the brand within the brand. So when you're growing that brand within the organization, it's important to have those advocates to take you to other levels too. So that's pretty good.
Absolutely. And, again, since you're a Kiwi, I'm going to keep giving Kiwi love, which is, I remember being in China and I was pregnant with my daughter, and my mentor, I call him my mentor, my advocate at the time, he knew I was going to have to take a break. There was a job promotion. He thought I was the right person for the role. And he knew that I would be leaving maybe 3 months in to take time off for the baby, which would be, 3 months that I was taking. And he still chose me for that role. And to me, that is true advocacy, again, because there could have been many people in the room saying, why choose her when we know we're going to lose her for 3 months? And Nigel Harris, I'm going to give Nigel credit, but Nigel was a huge advocate for me, and someone who who did raise the flag for me, and I just want to provide proper credit to him now.
Yeah, cool. The third area is around you taking opportunities. Sounds like you put your hand up for these opportunities when they came along. So for our listeners' sake, just, from them listening to it, if they do have opportunities coming here in front of them and they're going like, oh, I'm not sure whether I shouldn't, should they be putting their hand up for opportunities? Should they be looking for these opportunities?
Yeah, I think they should. I've been asked that question many times. They said, Sondra, you went to China twice, Japan and Thailand. Why did you keep saying yes? And, my answer is because I wanted to continue to learn and grow, right? That China is the largest automotive market in the world. And if you're in automotive, you'd be crazy not to want to work there. Thailand, obviously from a Ford perspective, as you guys know, whether it's with Everest or a Ranger and our products that we were delivering, again, and then, you can get some great massages there too. And, Japan, which was my first role, it was life-changing because from a perspective of learning how the Asia culture operates, how it transforms in terms of when we talk about leadership, watching the leadership dynamics and how decisions were made, and when there were quality issues, how quality issues were addressed, and quite honestly, how to get your point of view across in a way that is respectful, and creating relationships that were new and different in a way that I never had before. I'll tell you, 3 years later, I was standing at the train station, getting ready to leave to come back to the U.S., and there were 7 or 8 Japanese people, both male and female, waving me off, and, people who attended my wedding. So it wasn't just about the work, it was about the friendships and the relationships and the culture as well.
And you can't beat that. Those relationships that you build, you're building friends for life and relationships for life, and that's really important. And I keep saying to people, keep networking. It's really important.
And
for
point
you.
is, I would even say, as we talk about leadership and leadership changing, global networks are going to be so key. And as we start developing these relationships, sometimes something unique will happen. Say Tesla did something in China. I worked in China for 6 years. I have a group of people I can tap into. I can't read this article because it's in Chinese. Can you tell me, what is Tesla doing? And I would never have been able to do that had I not said yes in 2006, the first time, to China.
Yep.
And so I think it's super important for us to have these networks globally in order to be effective leaders.
Cool. So who's your favorite leader and why? In other words, this person could be from alive or from history. Who is their favorite leader?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I would have to say, for me, MLK Jr. is my favorite leader. When you said alive or deceased, it's just because he was so revolutionary in his message and his process, and the way he was able to bring both white and Black people across the line to support a cause that was, really about basic human rights and humanity, and that he suffered and gave so much, including his life for it. But the passion, the desire, the fact that he kept getting up after being knocked down so many times, so many of us would just say, you know what, not worth it. Tired of being kicked, tired of being, threatened. My family's threatened. But he kept pursuing the dream. And, I actually had a chance to take my daughter to Washington, D.C. last week to look at his statue and his memorial, and to read some of the quotes and really to take in what it meant to be him. And it is just so amazing that type of person existed in our lifetime, especially when you look at the discourse today and the lack of a clear leader, I would say, who has those type of values.
Yeah. MLK, for our listeners, Martin Luther King.
Sorry, yes, Martin Luther King Jr. Sorry.
No, it's all good. It's all good. I knew that's where you were going. I thought I would just do that for the listeners' sake. But yeah, it's really good and fantastic leader. If you were sitting with him on a park bench, having a coffee together, would there be one question that you would love to ask him?
I would love to ask him about, his speech about having a dream and what was the thought behind developing it. And again, why keep going? What was the impetus to keep going when there were so many reasons to stop? Because that's really how you feel as a leader sometimes within, say, a company or a corporation, when you're pushing for a specific point of view. And there's so many reasons where you're like, I know my boss already wants to do A and I'm pushing for B. You have to have courage to keep pushing for B if you have rationale. It doesn't mean that, we won't go with A, but at least you've had a chance to have your day in court. And for better or worse, that's been my philosophy at times in my career. Just keep it. I always tell my team, it's important to share your point of view, even if it's not one that's taken, because it does open up the dialogue for additional thoughts and ideas. And so I just think that's an important lesson for all of us.
Sure is. And I think that too many leaders are sitting back and not saying enough, or they're not offering up enough, and they need to. And I think it's a very good point that you just said there. Now, the show here is called Leadership is Changing. When I say that title, that statement, what does it mean for you?
Well, I just think it's true. Leadership is changing. It's becoming more collaborative. It's becoming more people-oriented. As a leader, we're required to be more open, more engaging with the people who we lead. And something that I find fascinating is, emotional intelligence and self-awareness, are key styles of leadership now that you must have, key elements of leadership that weren't so critical maybe 25 years ago when I started at the company. But now people want to be heard. They want to, they want you to, as a leader, to understand their point of view, even if you choose to go a different way. And I think that's very important. And as a leader, you have to know, how are you projecting yourself? Are you projecting strength? Are you projecting empathy? Is the team on board with you? I just think it's extremely important for us to recognize COVID has changed so much, and I don't think there's any turning back, quite honestly.
Yeah, it has. It's affected a lot, and it's changing a lot. And those who aren't getting on board, well, they're going to get left behind and become irrelevant, and people are going to not look at them as a leader going forward. So it's important that they do.
Exactly.
Now, you and I are living in a very fast world, and we're seeing things changing all the time. Even if you think about the vehicle industry and EVs and electric vehicles and so forth, with technology driving a lot of it, data, social, business, fast. When I think about that, what makes, in your opinion, what makes a leader successful today in that fast-paced, ever-changing world?
I think leaders have to first recognize who their high-performing employees are. And in a world that is so fast-changing, you have to be prepared to reskill and upskill them, because otherwise they start to feel obsolete and you won't get the best out of them. So I always start with people and the relationships and making sure they have what they need to be successful. So developing them, inspiring others. My team just asked the other day, I asked them, do we want to sponsor a family for Christmas? Because we are all blessed with so much, and there are so many who have so little. So it's not just inspiration in the work setting, but it's as a whole person. And I want to make sure we continue to do those types of things to show a little bit of humanity in the work that we do. I think leaders have to think critically. We have to communicate clearly. And most importantly, we have to create accountability. I was on LinkedIn the other day, and it talked about the worst way to destroy a team is to allow someone who's disruptive to not be held accountable for that disruption. And that's key for me in my leadership style. Like, if you're not delivering or creating some type of chaos within the team, I want to address it and make sure our employees are able to move ahead effectively. But being collaborative, having diverse networks, inspiring others, leading through that change, those are the things that are going to be necessary for this next wave of leadership, I would say.
Yeah, excellent. I've actually got a program called Leading Through Change, and I'm glad you mentioned it. It's you even know, but it's true, because we do need to lead through change. One is to go through change ourselves, but also to lead others through the change too. Really important. And I like what you say there about leaders needing to be accountable with disruption. So whoever it is and being disruptive, so forth, there has to be some accountability with it too. So it can't just happen and then that's it. Good luck. But very important. Now, you and I have been talking through the lenses, or been talking through about leadership and leaders and so forth. If we were change our lens or change gears right now and talk from the employee's perspective, how has their expectations of leaders changed?
That's a good question. I think employees, they want to be, if I think about when I started at the company as this young person, I was really quiet a lot because I was here to listen and learn. Today, as young people are coming into the company, they want to share their point of view. They want to be heard. It goes back to this idea of, as a leader, having to change in order to make sure that we are empathetic and that we are very self-aware. But part of that empathy is being able to allow a voice to our employees to make sure that they have what they need in terms of our flexibility of our plot policies, whether it's our work options or remote work. And as I mentioned earlier, to keep reskilling and upskilling. One thing that I love about this new generation that is coming in is that, one, they care so deeply about their work. I know, it's always easy to just use throwaway comments of, oh, they're not as lazy or as focused, but I don't see that at all. What I see is if they're only going to work 10 hours, they're going to give me the best 10 hours they have, but they also want a life outside of work. And quite honestly, shouldn't we all want that?
Exactly.
Yep. For many years, it's this badge of honor to, work 16 hours a day and say, oh, I worked 16 hours a day. But this new generation gets it. They'll give you their all in a certain time frame, and then they want this time to take care of themselves, their family, their well-being. And it's important as a leader that we recognize that and we're able to get that amazing 10 hours or whatever the number is. I'm not saying that every person works just 10 hours. I'm just saying whatever that time frame is, they're giving you their all. And I love it about them. I have quite a few millennials on my team, and I absolutely adore them and adore working with them because it's amazing the output that I'm getting from them in the time that they're working during the day.
Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah, because I think that you're right. I mean, they want some strong leadership to follow, but they also want to have their opinion, as you said, which I think is great, is around having their voice heard. They want to be able to have it heard and be listened to. And then the other one would be how they can contribute. Once again, I think you're mentioning it a few times, contributing, collaboration, communities. And that's what we're responsible for building, is around all those things. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sondra, if you were to get at your crystal ball now, think about the future, if I can think of it that way, and where do you see leadership being in 5 years?
A couple of the things I've mentioned already, and it's funny, I was reading this London Business School article the other day, and I'm like, you got it. That's exactly what I mean, which is the diverse networks. I think we're becoming more and more global. I'm talking to you. You're in New Zealand, and I'm in cold Michigan right now. But just having the diverse networks to be able to dive into points of view, systems, processes, cultures, being able to culture shape. And what I say about that, because I find it fascinating right now, even within my own company at Ford, is, when we made the announcement that we were setting up the Model E business and the Ford Blue business, with that comes some culture shaping, right? And it's not just doing what we've done the last 119 years. You have to be a leader that is able to inspire, to shape and develop a new culture. And with that culture shaping is lessons on leadership, people, growth. And to me, that's super important. As I talked about collaboration, you have to be able to collaborate with different teams. No one person has all the answers. Again, very different from early in my career where everything was going to the big boss for the final decision. It really is a conversation of point of views across leaders, and you have to collaborate. Yes, there's still that DRI, that direct responsible individual, but he's not going off into a corner and making he or she, I should say, are not going off into a corner making decisions on their own. They are collaborating. And then I would just say connecting, building those connections of trust and engagement across the teams and employees. Because if you can't connect with someone, it's very difficult to build great things or products or services or experiences. You have to be able to, there has to be some level of empathy across the aisle and some level of connection to do that.
Excellent, Sondra. This has been an awesome conversation. Thank you so much for joining me today. If our listeners wanted to get hold of you, where should they go?
Yeah, at any time. I am available on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn profile is my name, Sondra Sutton Phung. I can be reached through that medium anytime.
Excellent. Well, once again, thank you so much for joining me. There you go, listeners. Another wonderful episode on the Leadership is Changing podcast. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Dennis Giannoutsas. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.